London's fog presses against the window of my study. I am recording the most intricate case of my life. At the center of this story is a child, 10-year-old Alice Whitby, once a ward of Whitechapel's workhouse, now nurtured in the home of the wealthy. But what cruelty of nature, or what twist of nurture, could turn a child so angelic in appearance into the very heart of terror? In polite society, Alice was the very image of grace, curtsying, softly saying yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, in her gentle voice, a miniature portrait of Victorian refinement. Yet, within weeks, calamities descended upon the Pembroke household, each stranger and darker than the last. Servants whispered that some misfortune had entered the home with the orphan. London's finest physicians exhausted themselves, yet no scientific cause was found. And I, an alienist, trained in the treatment of madness and affliction of the mind, found myself ensnared in a puzzle that lay far beyond the boundaries of science. By the light of the gas lamp at night, I turn the pages of my notebook. Before me lies the diary of the late governess, who, before her fatal fall, wrote of her growing dread at Alice's hollow-eyed doll and window, her strange habit of silently standing at her bedside at midnight. The servants' testimonies are recorded, claims of laughter echoing from empty rooms, of dead animals left upon the threshold like some ghastly offering. And then there is Alice herself, golden curls, an innocent smile, clutching an old rag doll in her hands, and fixing me with that calm yet disquieting gaze. I have seen raving lunatics, soldiers broken by war's trauma, madmen screaming to the heavens. But never have I witnessed a child receive the news of death and respond with nothing, only a polite, wordless nod. That unsettles me to my core. Is she merely a victim of trauma, a brilliant but malign nature, or something else? Something beyond the human condition? When the great clock of Big Ben tolls 3, and the wind shrieks over London's rooftops, I feel it. Even in the silence of my chamber, something dark is breathing. A darkness no reason can ever describe. I dread what words may spill onto the next page of this journal. For if my fears prove true, then within the walls of a noble household, beneath the guise of innocence, sits a predator in the form of a child, a riddle of flesh and blood, ready at any moment to strike with a merciless smile. London, 1881. A city of contradiction. On the eastern edge lay Whitechapel's narrow shadowed alleys, walls blackened with soot, workhouses choked with filth, where thousands of destitute souls struggled for breath. To the west, another London altogether, broad squares lined with elegant houses, the clatter of carriage bells, and glittering assemblies of the wealthy. Between these two worlds a child was born. Her name, Alice Whitby. Alice first opened her eyes within the walls of a workhouse, a hulking edifice of brick, its windows forever veiled in smoke and fog. There, poverty, sickness, and death were constant companions. One child in 5 did not live to see 5 years of age. Alice herself barely survived. When she was but 2 years old, a terrible plague swept through, taking dozens of lives, including those of her parents. At dawn, the wagons came for the bodies, hauling them away beneath shrouds of white cloth. By the week's end, Alice was alone. A crowded ward, children crying, the sick groaning, matrons with weary faces watching over them like shadows on the wall. The other children wailed and shrieked, but she only watched. Wide, solemn eyes, as if every sight imprinted itself deep within her. Years later, one matron would recall the others screamed and clamored, but that girl, she only stared. Even at such a tender age, there was a strange calm upon her face, as though life had turned her to stone, so she might endure. Time passed, and then one day fortune opened her a new door for Alice the Pembrokes. A wealthy yet childless couple, Arthur Pembroke, a powerful magnate in the textile trade, and his wife Helena, who had long yearned for the name of mother. In Victorian society, orphans were regarded with suspicion. Poverty was a blemish, and the workhouse child a mark of disgrace. Yet the Pembrokes resolved to take in a little girl, perhaps to win the world's esteem, or perhaps to soothe the hollow ache within their own hearts. So it was that on a cold March morning, Alice Whitby was carried out of fog-shrouded Whitechapel and into a house where everything gleamed: warm hearths, velvet drapes, silver that caught the light. Yet with her, unseen, another presence crossed their threshold, a shadow that in the days to come would alter the life of that family forever. Alex's first days in the Pembroke household passed in peace. She behaved like the very model of a polite child, offering her greetings with a bow, playing quietly in the nursery, and sitting at the dining table with flawless manners. Before we open the diary and walk into the shadows of Millhaven, I want you to do something for me. If you read drawn to the stories history tried to bury, the ones whispered behind closed doors, click subscribe now and tap the bell so the next time we unlock something like this, you will be here when it happens. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, leave a like. It tells me you're ready to go deeper. And in the comments, tell me exactly where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world you're in when this door opens. Because once you've heard it, there's no going back. To Mrs. Pembroke, it seemed as though her years of prayers had at last been answered. Yet among the servants, a faint unease lingered. They murmured to one another, "The girl seldom laughs. She only watches, as though she knows some secret no one else can see." The first incident occurred scarcely 3 weeks after her arrival. One evening, when Arthur Pembroke returned from his office, he found the maids huddled together in terror. The cook's voice trembled. "Mistress, what is happening here?" Then every eye turned toward the great hound, kept for the protection of the house. It lay dead upon the lawn, eyes wide open, yet with no wound upon its body, as though some unseen force had drained the very life from it. Alice was seated not far away upon the grass, doll clutched in her hands, her gaze lowered. Mrs. Pembroke rushed to her, asking breathlessly, "Child, did you see anything?" Alice looked up with innocent eyes and shook her head. "No, mother, I was only playing with my doll." Some claimed they had heard faint laughter in the courtyard, as though a child had been playing there, though at that hour Alice was not in the nursery. One aged housemaid went further still. "I swear upon my life, when the beast breathed its last, I saw the girl at the window, and in her eyes there was no light, only darkness." Arthur Pembroke silenced them with anger. "Enough of this nonsense. Mere coincidence, nothing more. There is no curse here." But the seed had been sown, and in every servant's heart grew a shadow of dread whenever their eyes fell upon Alice. A few nights later came another disturbance. At the stroke of midnight, a scream from Mrs. Pembroke roused the entire household. She swore that, upon waking suddenly, she had seen Alice standing at the foot of her bed, silent, motionless, clutching her doll to her chest. The child's eyes were wide open, fixed steadily upon her, when Mrs. Pembroke whispered, "Alice, why are you here?" The girl answered with but a single sentence, in a voice so cold that the air itself seemed to grow colder still. "I am watching to see how you sleep." Then, without another word, she turned and walked softly back toward the nursery. A shiver ran the length of Mrs. Pembroke's body. She woke her husband in fright, but Arthur dismissed it yet again as a trick of nerves. No. Yet from that night onward, an uncanny hush seemed to settle over Pembroke House. Footsteps echoed in empty corridors for hours on end, and sometimes, faint, fleeting, from the nursery drifted the sound of a child's laughter, though when one went to look, Alice lay fast asleep, A few days later, a new governess was appointed at Pembroke House, Miss Elizabeth. She was a tender-hearted yet dutiful woman who took upon herself the task of instructing Alice and watching over her. At first, all seemed ordinary. Alice was polite, quiet, and outwardly obedient. Yet Miss Elizabeth soon noticed one peculiar detail: the doll. It was nothing more than an old, tattered rag doll. Lifeless in appearance, yet Alice never parted with it. At the dinner table, in the nursery, even when she slept, it was always clasped tightly in her hands. And when any servant dared to touch it, Alice's eyes grew so hard, so cold, that all drew back in unease. One night, the governess confided in her diary. I saw, when I had extinguished the lamp and turned to leave Alice's bedside, the child lay with eyes wide open, staring at me. Her lips were moving, as though she whispered to someone, but there was no one in the room, save that doll. On the next pages, the writing grew ever more disturbed. This afternoon I took the doll, if only for a moment, to mend its torn dress. But the instant I laid hands upon it, a chill ran the length of my spine. And Alice spoke with such loathing as though I had committed some unholy act. Would do not touch it again. It is mine. And then another entry, At the stroke of midnight I heard laughter. The nursery was empty. Alice was asleep, or seemed to be, but the doll's mouth was open, as though it had just spoken. Only days later, tragedy struck. Miss Elizabeth, who had grown pale and frail with each passing day, fell from the upper stair and was killed. All called it an accident. Yet some servants swore they had seen her but moments before, and Alice standing upon the landing, doll in hand, peering silently down. Afterward, her diary was found. On the final page, scrawled in a trembling hand, there was only one sentence. The doll stares at me with hollow eyes, and at times I think it blinks. Dr. Edmund Falk was summoned by the Pembroke family. A renowned alienist, his reputation rested on his ability to probe even the most impenetrable depths of the human mind. Yet when he first seated Alice before him, he felt the same unsettling presence recorded in the governess's diary. A cold stillness that seemed to drain life from the room. Alice sat upright in her chair, golden hair falling across her forehead. The same old rag doll clutched tightly in her hands. Dr. Falk spoke softly. Alice, do you know that everyone fears you? The child lifted her gaze, offering a smile so innocent yet unnaturally precise that a shiver ran down the doctor's spine. They fear me, then why do they not stay away? He changed his line of questioning. Why do you stand outside your parents' bedroom at night? Alice's fingers brushed the doll's hair. Then, in a quiet, deliberate voice, she said, because they do not see me, so I watch how they sleep. Dr. Falk recorded in his journal. There is no emotion in her tone, neither innocence nor mischief, only a cold, unwavering calm. A calm I have observed in war prisoners or in criminals who feel no burden from their crimes. Right? During the interview, a moment came when the doll seemed to pierce the doctor's eyes. It was as if a shadow moved within its hollow sockets. Doctor, Falk asked, Alice, do you speak to your doll? Oh, for the first time, the child spoke a sentence that froze the air of the room. I do not. It speaks to me, and what does it say? The doctor pressed. Alice smiled faintly and whispered, that everyone will soon sleep, and some people will never wake again. The clock in the room struck 3. From beyond the window, London's fog carried the muffled tolls of Big Ben. Dr. Falk's hand trembled as he wrote in his journal, a single question hammering through his mind. Is this merely a disturbed child? Or does something dwell within her that lies beyond human comprehension? A few days later, an evening unfolded at Pembroke House that sent chills through every heart. Mrs. Pembroke had rushed to the kitchen to extinguish a small fire when she noticed the gas lamp had toppled over. The flames were quickly brought under control, Yet what accompanied them was far stranger. The cook's pet rabbit, normally confined to the children's room, was found dead, surrounded by tiny scraps of paper, as if symbols had been drawn upon them. Kuddle the maid swore they had seen Alice leaving the room that evening. But when anyone approached, she was found seated on the floor, doll in hand, as though hiding something. Mrs. Pembroke asked gently, Alice, what happened?" Alice nodded softly, yet her eyes retained that same cold, inhuman calm. It was for my doll. Someone frightened it." Arthur Pembroke tried to reassure everyone, yet the servant's whispers grew more urgent. "Piot, this child, she knows everything. Without her doll, she is silent, but with it, it is as if the darkness itself speaks through her." At the stroke of midnight, another terrifying event occurred. Miss Elizabeth, still not fully recovered, was asleep in her room when a scream rang out. The household awoke to chaos. She had fallen from the upper floor and perished. All claimed it was an accident, yet the servants insisted they had seen Alice at the window. The child, silent, doll in hand, peering down with a smile utterly devoid of any human warmth. Dr. Falk recorded in his notes, "This child is not innocent." After every incident, she watches with a cold, calculating gaze, as though noting every action. And that doll, perhaps it has come from another world. From that night onward, tranquility vanished from the Pembrokes' lives. Every room held a hidden silence, faint laughter echoed in the hallways, and Alice's lifeless eyes transformed the house into a prison of living fear. One lived of fear. Dr. Falk visited Pembroke House daily, meeting with Alice. He observed that the child answered every question, yet her words carried no emotion, no human response. Every sentence seemed carefully measured, every smile utterly lifeless. One day Falk asked Alice, "Why are you so attached to your doll?" Alice tilted her head and spoke softly. It sees everything I cannot, and it tells me who will live and who will not." A cold shiver ran through Falk's spine. He pressed further. Is it all in your mind? Or something else? Alice gazed at him in silence, then ran her hand over the doll's head and said, It does not. It shows me sometime. I just watch," Falk recorded in his journal. "I have treated many patients, mad, fearful, vengeful. But never have I seen in a child such cold, calculating thought, such prediction of death. It does not seem human." And he took a deep breath, contemplating that Alice's past and her connection with the doll might be tied to some ancient or mysterious event. Every death, every accident, every whispered remark seemed to revolve around the doll. The Pembrokes' lives had become consumed entirely by fear. The silence in every room, the laughter that drifted through the night, the shadow that peered from every window, everything fell under Alice's watchful gaze. And in Dr. Falk's mind, one question resounded like a hammer. Is this child merely mentally ill? Or does she harbor something beyond human understanding? At night, as London's fog swallowed the city, Falk wrote, "If this girl truly is what I suspect, then every soul near her is in mortal peril, and no one can predict where her next step will lead." Within a few weeks, another unexpected incident shook Pembroke House. This time, the victim was a servant working late in the child's playroom. By morning, the man was found dead, without a single visible wound, and the room appeared as if some terrifying game had been meticulously arranged. Whispers among the servants grew louder. One remarked, there is something not human about her. After every accident, she merely stands with her doll, smiling, as if everything unfolds according to her plan. Dr. Falk noted that Alice's smile was always the same, cherubic, harmless in appearance, yet concealing a cold, calculating logic within. One night, gathering his courage, Falk hid in Alice's room. She sat silently with her doll when suddenly laughter emerged from the doll's mouth. The doctor tried to cry out, but hearing that voice he faltered. Alice turned her gaze upon him and nodded silently, as if to say, "You know all this, but you can do nothing." The Pembrokes now lived in constant terror. Silence filled every room, faint laughter drifted through every corridor, and the midnight chimes each night marked her presence. The maids peered from windows and locked doors, yet somehow Alice was always near. "Doctor," Follock wrote in his journal, "this child is not merely innocent. She anticipates every event, notes every action, and plans with complete precision. To uncover her true nature, I would have to risk myself. And every moment it feels as though that danger is near and lethal." That night, London's fog wrapped the house in its suffocating embrace. And in Falk's mind, one question remained: is Alice human or something else? And has she already planned her next victim? Doctor. Falk decided that mere observation was no longer sufficient. He would have to delve into the depths of Alice's mind, understand her games, her secrets, and the doll's mysterious connection. By day he spoke with her repeatedly. By night he analyzed every detail in his journal. One evening, as London's fog clung to the rooftops, Falk resolved to spend the night in Alice's room. He opened the door quietly and found her sitting with her doll silent, her gaze fixed unwaveringly upon him. Softly he asked, "Alice, are you not afraid to speak to your doll?" No. She tilted her head and offered a smile that sent a chill through his heart. "Oh, no. It only tells me who is safe and who is not." Falk stepped closer and asked, And do you understand what you are capable of?" Alice remained silent, then stroked the doll's hair and said, "I only watch. And anyone who does wrong will not remain here in the end." Falk's breath caught. He realized his senses were not deceiving him. There was nothing human about Alice. She was a being who foresaw every event, calculated every movement, and posed a threat to all around her. At that very moment, a sound startled him. From outside the window came a faint laugh. The doll's mouth moved, and Alice, utterly indifferent, said, "Now you will see for yourself what I can do." Falk stumbled back, heart hammering. He understood that his next notes would require more than mere observation. He would have to confront the truth itself, and that truth lay far beyond human comprehension. In the dead of night, every room of Pembroke House lay silent. Each servant, each resident, huddled in their quarters, gripped by fear, awaiting some impending event. Doctor. Falk sat hidden in a corner, notebook and pen in hand. Alice was in her nursery, doll in hand, perfectly still. Yet Falk's racing heartbeat warned him that this calm was only a facade. Suddenly, with a clatter, the room was filled with light. The chandelier above jolted and crashed to the floor, and near the doll, a series of tiny, explosive sounds rang out. Falk rushed forward, but as he tried to approach Alice, she lifted the doll, and her eyes suddenly glowed with an unnatural brilliance. This is all for you. Whoever errs will never return." Alice's voice was so cold that a shiver ran through Falk's body. What followed was beyond belief. Strange, otherworldly sounds echoed throughout the house. Doors slammed shut on their own, and woven into the silence of the servants was a laughter that seemed human, and yet not. Within moments, each member of the Pembroke family collapsed to the floor in terror and horror, and Falk caught but a glimpse of the helplessness before Alice and her doll. In his final journal entry, Falk wrote, "I have seen much in my life, but this child, she is no child. She is a being beyond human comprehension, who predicts every action and inflames every heart with her merciless gaze. If I write this, it may be for the last time. Pembroke House has become a living tomb, and Alice Whitby, perhaps forever, a shadow over humanity." London's fog once again enveloped the city. Falk peered from the window, terrified, knowing that the true nature of Alice's mysterious power lay far beyond any human understanding. And so, in the guise of an innocent child, a murderous shadow had forever altered the life of the Pembroke family, leaving Dr. Falk's diary as the sole testament, a record of a dark secret that could never be fully revealed.